It's time for our pit stop. Here, we take a brief rest. It's a time to refuel, recharge, and explore shorter topics that are meaningful and helpful to us RVers. Welcome to RV Out West. I'm your host, Brooks. Driving on the Pacific coastal beaches is a fun day activity to do. And with numerous access points, it's pretty simple too. Driving with windows down, the sunroof open, and that sweet ocean air, it's all just pretty intoxicating. It's fun to stop, unload the beach chairs, and have a tailgate picnic, maybe even fly a kite. It just makes for a perfect day. Knowing that, there are some things to know so that you can stay safe and enjoy your beach day. Joining the show today is Washington State Trooper Weatherwax. She shares the ins and outs of what we need to know. Thank you for coming on RV Out West. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I think it's pretty unique to be able to drive on our coastal beaches here in Washington State. So I was wondering, can you share with us a little bit about kind of what the history is and why we are even allowed to drive on our beach?
Well, I did a lot of research on this, but I couldn't find a specific reason. I know historically we've always let people drive on the beach. It's just been a long-standing tradition in the United States, and that includes Washington. And it's really awesome because Washington has so many beaches that we're allowed to drive on. Like Long Beach is actually the world's longest drivable beach, if you didn't know that. So yeah, but it only takes third when it comes to the longest beaches in the world. But we just have the luxury of doing that in the state of Washington, but I couldn't find any actual reasons behind it.
That's okay. It's very cool. It is very cool.
Yeah.
I've driven on the beaches. I might have maybe broken a few rules. So I want to find out just kind of what are the rules for driving on the beach, but also what tips and suggestions, how does somebody safely drive down the beach so they hopefully avoid getting stuck?
Right. So the first thing I suggest, if you haven't driven on the beach, maybe let somebody else that's a little bit more experienced. But you kind of have to follow the same rules that we have on the actual highways because technically driving on the beach is a state highway. So for that, the speed limit is only 25 miles an hour, which is, I feel like it's still a little fast. You still have to wear your seatbelts. I know even though it's 25, people think they don't have to wear their seatbelts, which we have seen people get ejected if they roll over. So we don't want to see any injuries from that. Basically, no donuts, no reckless driving in the surf. I know it might be fun to do donuts, but you never know. Like there might be people walking around, just stay safe. You might hit a soft patch of sand. The beach is kind of unpredictable, so we don't want any reckless driving there. Same rules apply with registration. You still need to have insurance. You have to have a valid license. You can't just let your kids drive, even though it seems like it's a nice area to do that. Obviously, no drinking and driving. I would say if you have a four-wheel drive, that's strongly recommended. Usually the people that get stuck are the smaller sedans. You don't want to drive in the sand dunes. We don't allow ATVs. So kind of tips for driving on the sand is you want to stay on the hard packed sand, which that means it's kind of the sweet spot in between the softer sand and where the water comes up. So kind of when the tide is going out, you see that hard sand where it's kind of wet looking, but it's not wet. So just stay off the sand, the soft sand, and then you don't want to drive into the surf. Also, whenever you're driving on the sand, make sure that pedestrians always have the right of way. Be aware of wildlife. There's a lot of like animals that come on the coast. Seals, birds. Washington's really known for having like clam beds, and you just have to just be aware. Follow all the signs because some areas you might be able to drive, whereas others you may not. So just look for the signs because some beaches have sections that are closed off during it's around April 15th to Labor Day. So just watch the signs.
And that April 15th to Labor Day is because of the clam beds and wildlife, so it's protecting the habitat?
Right. Yeah, we have a lot of different wildlife areas, and clams are big out here, the razor clams.
So in the unlikely event that one does get their vehicle stuck, I would assume anybody and everybody should be prepared to self-rescue the best that they can. But then if for some reason their self-rescue is not working, is it a call AAA or is there a local tow company that is skilled in expertise in getting people out of the beach? Do they call 911? Kind of what should be their process?
Right, right. So I always say make sure you are aware of the tides. You never want to be driving on the beach when the tide is coming up. Springs more dangerous in case you get stuck. So unfortunately, the State Patrol cannot assist because we can't get liable because we can easily get stuck too. So we get multiple calls probably weekly about people getting stuck. But unfortunately, all we can do is give you a number for a tow truck. If you have to call a tow truck, it can get really expensive depending on if you need a pull out or where you're at. During the busy seasons, like probably last weekend and during the summer, there's actually tow companies on the busier beaches that will drive up and down because they see people getting stuck a lot more. So, and it's usually those smaller sedans, those, rear wheel drive vehicles. It's not your trucks and things like SUVs. So, just make sure your vehicle is beach ready in case you decide to go driving on the beach this summer.
Are you searching for a campsite reservation and struggling to find an opening? Then let's pause and hear a word from our friends over at Camper Alerts. It's summertime and the great outdoors are calling, but did you forget to book a campsite 9 months ago? Well, don't worry. Say goodbye to sold-out campgrounds with Camper Alerts. With Camper Alerts, you can choose your campground, select your site type, and set a personalized alert. And when a site becomes available, they will notify you. It's that simple. Visit camperalerts.com today and start setting your alerts. What about overnighting? So like if I wanted to drive out on the beach, find a spot, pitch a tent or, whatever, is that allowed? Is that not allowed? What's kind of the deal there?
So overnight parking or camping is it's not allowed on any of our beaches. So there is an RCW about it. But yeah, we don't allow it in the state of Washington.
Now, do you have any fun stories you can share in a situation where they got themselves stuck or something you've seen that's...
Well, unfortunately, we see stuff all the time. People getting stuck, usually the younger kids. We've had cars hauling trailers and then get stuck, and unfortunately, the tide comes up and destroys everything, which is a bad day for them. It's not a great story, but we have seen a lot of cars get submerged in the water. Depending on where you're at, if you're like kind of in the softer sand, like the tow truck can only do so much for you. But yeah, if you do get stuck in the tide, make sure you safely get out of the vehicle. We've had people like just sit in their cars and then think they're getting rescued, but they won't come and rescue you if you're in the water. They have to wait.
That is wild.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just recommend don't doing it if you don't feel comfortable doing it.
And could one go, because I know like out north of Ocean Shores, right? There's kind of those access roads. Same thing with like Long Beach. There's those access roads to get you access out to the beach. So if somebody wanted to go out and then drive either north or south up and down the beach to the next access point, is there a place where that's one can find those in advance to be mapped out and be like, okay, let's take a 5 mile drive down the beach. And I know that I can, enter here and pop out and exit there or something like that. Are those, just marked, or is it you just kind of got to know in advance before you kind of decide to take on an adventure like that?
Well, they most times are not on Google. It's kind of you got to know where they're at. We actually have had like rolling fog that comes into the ocean on the beach, and you'll be driving. You're like, oh no, I don't know where I'm at anymore, and that's actually a reason that some people get stuck as well. My advice is if you go on those access points, you see like maybe early in the morning there could be fog, to set like your odometer like start it over at 0 so you know how far you've gone.
That's a great tip.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you want to share or talk to us about?
We didn't talk about any of the wildlife really. I have a big section about that.
Tell me about the wildlife. It was funny. I was driving on Long Beach. This was about 2 years ago, 2 years ago maybe, and there was a big dead whale, beached whale.
Yeah.
And it was so,
right.
We drove up, checked it out. The smell I will never forget.
Well, if you do see a distressed animal, like if you do, like in the case of a whale being on the shore, which is very rare, we would have to call a different agency. Fish and Wildlife wouldn't handle that. But if you do see a distressed marine mammal, you can call 911 and we'll get a hold of the Washington State Department of Fish and Wildlife that will come out and handle that. But we just recommend to stay away from wildlife, either whether it be dead or alive. Just you never know. Just leave it alone. You want to stay at least 100 yards away from like seal pups because the mother will return eventually. You're not allowed. There's actually a federal law that prohibits touching, feeding, and disturbing marine mammals. So yeah, no intentionally running over animals if you're driving on the shoreline as well. So
Okay. Well, I would like to say thank you very much for taking the time again out of your day to join us here. I really, really appreciate it.
yeah, no problem. You have a great one.
You can now shoot me a text. Those that have already done so, thank you. Just click on the link in the description right there in your podcast app with this episode. If you have a question about RVing, a topic you'd like me to cover, or if you just want to say hello, please send me a text. Thank you again for listening to RV Out West. I sincerely appreciate it. If you haven't already done so, please give RV Out West a follow on Facebook and Instagram and join us in the conversation. Next week's episode, we have a chat with Jeremy Puglisi of the RV Atlas podcast, and we talk the PNW, and he shares some great tips for us weekenders on the ways we can maximize our camping time and minimize the trip prep. It's a great conversation, and I'm excited to share it with you. Thanks so much for listening to RV Out West. Join us again next week. Please like and subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you choose to get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. I sure would appreciate it if you left a rating or a review of the show. Special thanks to Scott Holmes Music for providing us the intro song, We Are One. RV Out West can be found on Instagram and Facebook, where you can interact with us and follow along on our RV adventures around the Pacific Northwest. So get out there, explore, and go see what's beyond the horizon.